Welcome everybody to our webinar called Intro to Howspace in Microsoft Teams. So we're so happy to see so much interest in this webinar. It seems like the integration has a lot of interest. So I'm really happy that you guys are all here today. My name is Johanna. I'm a customer success manager located in Toronto, Canada. And I'm one of the co-hosts for today for this hour-long session alongside my colleague, Otto.
Hello, everybody, and welcome for this webinar. I'm here in Howspace working as a product ecosystem specialist, and I've been working around this Teams integration for some time. I'm really happy to see you all here, and I'm more than happy to answer all your questions related to especially using Howspace application in Teams, but also other technical or whatever other questions you might have during this webinar, or of course afterwards. So welcome.
And of course, this is a webinar, but it is an interactive one. And so although you don't have your videos and audio on, you're here and we're going to be interacting with chats that are directly below this webinar live stream. And also for afterwards, with a slight delay, we're going to be uploading a recording of this session so you can watch it and of course pass it on to your colleagues afterwards as well. And we do have a translation feature, so I'd encourage you to use that after the session, for example, to read people's comments and questions. That's actually located at the top right-hand side where you see a little purple globe icon. You can click onto that and choose one of the 22 languages of your choice. If you do that now, though, you will reload the page. So just to be aware of that, as the autoplay will hopefully be still on in the StreamYard, in this live stream. So as I mentioned, right below this live stream, there's going to be two chat questions. One is going to be for private questions if you have any technical issues or if you want to pose any questions to the hosts themselves, the admins on this workspace, feel free to put it in the private question section. But more importantly, actually, is the other chat where we have I'm curious to hear what you're hearing and seeing in this webinar. If you have any questions or general comments that you want everybody to see, please post them there. And I'll be asking you to put some reflections because we are also going to be sharing a little bit of a sneak peek into our world at Howspace and how we run Teams meetings inside. And also, more importantly, how do we continue that collaboration? So not just the live meeting is super important, but it's the before, during, and after. And so we want that conversation to live on in that conversation chat question there. And of course, if we can't get to any of the questions today, that chat will be there and we'll get to all of the questions after the session. So as I mentioned, this is going to be an hour-long session. We're going to be giving you a sneak peek on how we use Teams at Howspace. Of course, we can't sometimes share some of our customer work, so we have to share what we use it for. And that includes synchronously in team meetings where we're facilitating engaging meetings. We also are using Teams to convert meetings into ones that are more interactive, and also, of course, using the AI tools to actually make sense of the conversations. And just to really get decisions made more quickly and more transparently. And finally, the third kind of use case or demo that we'll be sharing is that asynchronous or on your own time, where we essentially enable collaboration even across teams within an organization. So that's super valuable. So I'm going to ask that we look at the pre-work, so that those questions that we posed in advance of our webinar, because this is ultimately where we are trying to get people's expectations, really responding to those directly. So I'm going to ask if we put a screen share of the welcome page here on the screen so we can talk through some of these comments. So the first thing, actually, thank you also for those of you who have already commented, but if you haven't already, you'll see an image on your screen of a map, of course, and we always like to see where you're coming in from. So if you haven't already, what you can do is click on that bottom right-hand corner little pin, as Otto's showing here. It'll turn green, and then you just place the pin on the location where you're joining us from today. So it's nice to also see that there's a ton from Europe, some from North America where I'm at as well, and otherwise. Great. And looking at the 2 polls that are also on this page, let's just actually look at some of the results here. So how familiar are you with Howspace? So we're seeing the majority actually are using it quite regularly. So that's nice to see, Howspace users. We've got also a mixture of having used it a couple of times and then some who haven't used it at all. So you're experiencing for those first time Howspace and the interaction that it entails. And then the second one, do you use Microsoft Teams in your work? So we're showing now the results. Of course, you would have seen these on your screen immediately. The vast majority, of course, are using it on a daily basis. No surprise, which is why you're here. And then, of course, there's some variety there of weekly basis or not in the organization. And that might change. Really nice to see that. And finally, our 2 open-ended questions. So based on our open-ended questions, what is Teams good at? Let's look at the results here. And I'm looking at, Teams is good for file sharing, for knowledge management, for everything. Nice. And then, of course, that second question, I'm just curious to see also what Teams might be better, how it could be used to better support your work and maybe what improvements that might have. Of course, I'm seeing large-scale conversations, so that might not be so easy to do in a Teams context. Collaboration between departments. There's some interesting examples of developments of the Howspace calendar integration with Microsoft. So really, really interesting things. And we can actually unpick some of these things. And of course, I must confess that the reason why we asked the question on the right was a little bit of an ulterior motive to also ask what Teams might be lacking. Of course, so that we can see how Howspace and Teams can be integrated so that Howspace can kind of beef up those maybe gaps that Teams might have. So that was, of course, our reason for asking that question. So just a little quick blurb about Howspace for the minority that doesn't know Howspace. So first of all, it's an online platform, and you would have experienced, coming into the process by having an invitation by a facilitator or a host of a webinar, in this case, inviting you into a process. You'd click onto it and you'd access it through your browser without any usernames or password. But of course, that's a personalized, secure access link that you're clicking. And it's an all-in-one platform for collaboration, for digital facilitation, and transformation. And it really complements Teams in various ways, which, of course, we'll share with you today. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Otto, to discuss why exactly we want to talk about this integration and why we thought that it was such a worthwhile one to pursue. And of course, how you can benefit from having those 2 platforms work alongside each other. So I'll invite Otto onto the screen with me.
Yes. So the why question, why Howspace and Microsoft Teams, and why to integrate to Microsoft ecosystem with our platform. One easy and big reply for this might be also that there is 1 million organizations using Teams daily basis. So that's a easy reply why. But then when going for this Howspace app for Teams, if we start with our application, what it is in nutshell, Howspace app is an application that you are able to share your workspaces inside Teams and use them in meetings, channel, and chats. So you are able to add this application to chat or channel tab, and also share the application in your meetings on this kind of stage, as they call it in Teams. And by this, you can extend the collaboration with your teammates, colleagues, and also work with external people outside your organization. So there is like a basic idea behind Teams that it combines different applications to keep everything needed for day-to-day work in one environment, and Howspace application then is supporting the same principle of modern work, as you don't need to leave from Teams when using Howspace with this application. So there is a one why again, like there might be a lot of users who are using Howspace and Teams, and with this application they can seamlessly use Howspace straight from their Teams and stay in one environment they're using for a lot of other communication during the daily work day. And then the usage of the application is made really seamless and easy with this single sign-on as SSO, because with the SSO you don't need to go through any login process, or you don't need any other accounts or anything like that, as we who know Howspace and have used Howspace know that you don't need any of those. But with SSO you can just log in with the same identity that you are using in Teams. And then when user opens the application or workspace in the application, it works immediately and it's available straight from their Teams environment. Let's go through these contexts a bit more detailed. So there are 3 different contexts where you can use this application: channels, meetings, and chat. And Howspace Workspace admin can add this Howspace needed to their team channel. For example, one workspace to different channel in several teams, or they can add just workspace to one general channel in their own Teams team as an organizational team. And by adding this to this channel, you can also make it easily sure that all the team members have access to this workspace, and this is because of the SSO I mentioned before. And then all the other team members can then contribute to the collaboration in Howspace Workspace. And in meeting, you can share Howspace Workspace as an app also to all the meeting participants, and users will be logged in with this SSO, and external users are able to get this kind of PIN code sent to their email, so they can get into Howspace in this Howspace Workspace shared in the meeting. And after the workspace admin has added the application, that all the participants can contribute and share the content, contribute to all the shared content. But it's always the admin who is in manage of this application, and they also have possibilities to manage what participants will see in the application and when. And then if needed, it's possible to also add it to chat, like one-on-one chat or group chats, and usages in similar way than in channel. And then why to use Howspace in Microsoft Teams? As I said, some reasons already before, but maybe one of those biggest is as the hybrid and modern work demands are growing greater and greater and bigger, there are a lot of need for different kind of facilitation, and especially when people are working hybrid in different places and in different time zones. There are a lot of demands for this kind of possibilities that we see that Howspace can enhance the collaboration in Teams. with features that we have in Howspace. Howspace also provides this kind of pre-meeting, in-meeting, and post-meeting experience, as you can continue collaboration after the meeting, but also you can have different kind of pre-works in Howspace before the meeting and so on. And then we still all the time can keep the same context like around what we are working. So if we have a project or whatever what we are doing, we always having everything what we have been working around in one place, then we are always able to get there in even between the meetings and collaborate with the people we are working together. And then, of course, the AI functionalities that we have in Howspace, so you can gather insights quickly and arrive to informed decisions, and also kind of gather information from large-scale audiences easily. And SSO was mentioned so many times that maybe I don't have to mention it again. And then, as we see that Howspace complements Teams, we all know that Teams have a lot of really good features like meetings and chats and channels, especially when you are working with a specific group of, let's say, 10 people, and they all know what they're doing with and with who, and there is quite strict borders of these groups. Everybody working in their own groups as teams. But we see that Howspace can complement Teams with these features that we provide, as workspaces in Howspace are noiseless, always contextual, and led by facilitators. And many of us have experienced that in Teams there are a lot of noise and action and notifications and so on, and sometimes it's really hard to focus when you would like to focus for one context. And then the seamless collaboration before, during, after the meetings, and also possibilities for co-creation and social learning, especially in large scale that Teams is not supporting so well. And then different kind of possibilities for cross-organizational and organization-wide cross-functional cooperation, what Howspace feature are enabling. There are some examples where how organizations are using Howspace and Teams together, and for example, complex contextual collaboration could be something like a strategic process or strategic development project where we need to engage a lot of people around the organization, and we have to have one place where we developing the ideas together. And as I said, cross-organizational collaboration, when we can add Howspace to our own teams, have it in our own environment as one extension for Teams, but then some external people can still work with us from browser in Howspace in this workspace shared with them. Then there are facilitated meetings. We are going through that in an example today. And then different kind of recurring meetings, from Teams weeklies to different kind of director boards and so on. And internal events, trainings, all the events that you need to share information, workshops and so on. They are really, this combination is really good for those. On the last slide, we had 5-6 different kind of examples how people are using Howspace within Teams. Since we often share our customers' work, we since we offer canned share of customers where we have thought it would be useful to share more details of how we have used these two platforms together. And with these three examples and demos, we will continue now. And I'll pass it to Johanna to share some more details about these.
Thanks so much, Otto. So of course, to answer the question of how we use Howspace and Teams integrated together, we decided to actually record one of our internal meetings, our regular monthly company-wide virtual meetups, where we come together to align with strategic directions, we brainstorm, we collaborate in general, and as well, we take time to connect and acknowledge the hard work of our colleagues, such an important aspect of really building a great team. So what you'll see next is actually two short highlight reels, two recordings that I'll talk through to showcase how we do things at Howspace, how we involve, how we facilitate, how we co-create and learn together. All this, of course, within the context of Howspace integrated into Teams. So the first one is just under 5 minutes recording of about 50 people coming together for our last monthly synchronously live in a Teams meeting. Now, as you watch, I'm curious to hear your reactions, particularly if you're also meeting on Teams. What do your meetings look like? To what extent do you have moments of engagement built into the meetings? And what do they look like? So please use the chat about the comments, reflections, and questions to record some of the reflections or your thoughts as you're watching the recording. So I'll ask Kate to put the recording on, and please do comment in the chat. First off, our monthlies typically don't begin at the live meeting itself. Each monthly meeting has its own page, added as a tab in our general channel, where people can go beforehand to check the agenda, at the very least. Using the typical flipped classroom model, we share any longer content for everyone to review in advance and get the conversation started days before the live meeting. This is especially important for those who can't make the live meeting, and especially taking into consideration those people in vastly different time zones. So how do we get the conversation started? Well, it might mean slide decks from each department, sharing updates from the last month, or a 3-minute update recorded as a video or audio file, which they then upload into designated spots on the page in the workspace. We would typically position each of these updates directly beside a chat question where people can ask clarifying questions or make comments that the team members then will respond to in the days leading up to the live meeting. Typically, our asynchronous activities for the monthlies also involve a pulse check of the company to get a sense of everyone's well-being. This month, the pulse is on its 9th round, providing a view of how aspects like work-life balance or motivation have changed, in this case, over the last 9 months. So now, on to some key moments of the live session itself. After some introductions, we get into breakout groups to discuss and brainstorm on a topic, and this time on motivation. The monthly page we've been working on from already has been added to the Teams meeting as an app that everyone in the meeting can interact with directly from within the Teams meeting. This, by the way, happens seamlessly when participants are coming into the meeting through the Teams app instead of the browser-based version of Teams. In this way, someone coming into the meeting doesn't have to shift their focus of attention onto another app and back and forth. Everything happens inside the Teams meeting. Similar to how we build in time for those who can't join live by adding those asynchronous spaces to join the conversation, so too do we try to minimize the language barrier. When using Howspace within Teams, you have access to all the functionality, like the translator tool, as well as the AI features that are built into each chat widget. Here I was using the translator tool and the AI summarizer to quickly make sense of the conversation in another language of my choice. Now for my favorite collaboration feature, quickly gathering everyone's input and comments, and then enabling everyone to make sense of the data by organizing their comments using sticky notes. This brainstorming and sorting exercise all happened within the span of 10 to 15 minutes, since everyone was doing it simultaneously. Now that would be really hard to replicate using paper in a meeting room. Finally, we were able to make sense of the conversation in real time using Howspace's advanced AI features. This can be done in two ways: allowing the participants in a session the ability to filter the comments visualized in a word cloud, as I'm doing here, or the facilitator of an interactive session can help visualize the conversation through a theme cluster, word cloud, a summary, and/or a sentiment analysis. These AI tools are accessible for all to use in order to help bring clarity and focus on the conversation at hand. So that was your first sneak peek. We'll be sharing with you another recording afterwards. So I've been keeping an eye out on the chat, answering a couple of questions. I'm just curious if there's anything that's standing out from that. So I'm actually just responding to one comment here about the size of the audience. And I'm just going to finish my sentence and say that the largest size of an audience that I've seen use Howspace has been about 20,000 people. So I was just encouraging somebody to make a larger audience so I can see if I can increase that little milestone of mine, or kind of a target audience. But ultimately, Howspace and the AI tools that are built into the chat enable you to have a conversation with large numbers of people, because of course, as a facilitator or moderator of a conversation, it would be impossible to do if you had to read through hundreds and hundreds of comments or even thousands of comments. But the AI at least gives you the ability to make sense using theme clusters and summaries, and of course using those AIs as catalysts for further discussion. So you always, asking more from participants after you reflect on comments. And maybe Otto, you can come on stage and answer one other question that I'm seeing in the chat. Craig mentioned, is the Howspace page for that meeting embedded in the meeting invite by the organizer? So I'm just kind of asking about, how does that look from a meeting invite perspective?
I'm not sure about that. Is the Howspace page for that meeting embed in the meeting invite? If you mean the Howspace application, it's not like it's added during the meeting, so it's not there. The let's say the link to the page, but when the meeting begins, people or the admin or the facilitator, they just share the application inside the meeting, and then everybody can use this Howspace workspace through the application. So in a way, the Howspace is embedded in the app, but not in the meeting invite. And to add for the previous one, I think there is a limitation in Teams for meetings, that the normal meeting can be 1,000 users. Just like small thing, but still.
Yeah, true. So I guess it's the Howspace doesn't have limitations, but the Teams might. Yeah. And of course, if you're working within Teams within your organization, obviously it would be the limit of your organization if you're talking about internal things. But then, of course, you can invite those external audience as well to, for example, to continue the collaboration afterwards. Yes. All right. If I'm not seeing any other comments in the chat with regards to this first recording, I think I'll move on to the second, just so you get a balanced view as well of another way to think about the Teams meeting. And it's more about that facilitated meeting and having a well-facilitated meeting. Like, what a joy it is to have a meeting where, all of those great meeting items, agendas and keeping pace and having conversations with everybody's voice on the table. So, of course, when we're talking about a well-facilitated meeting, we're talking where facilitators guide a group towards achieving its objectives while ensuring that everybody has the opportunity to contribute and to be heard. That's our philosophy at Howspace. So, and also this is where Howspace shines, because it has been designed by facilitators for facilitators to make meetings flow smoothly with customizable paths for different learning styles, and also various ways to engage all participants. And that was back to also a comment in the chat about how the AI is picking up different types of user inputted content. So right now it's based on text, but of course we are developing it further to also include audio transcripts, video transcripts, so that AI can then use that text that's generated to formulate kind of AI summaries, for example, out of all of those different multimedia aspects. So that's coming. So now let's go into some of these facilitation features that you're going to be seeing in the recording that we connected to, of course, a Teams meeting. And what you're going to be seeing is just about under 3 minutes recording this time, where we're trying to show a Teams meeting that's interactive and facilitated well in a smooth flowing context. Now, as you watch, I'm curious to hear your reactions to some of these features that we at Howspace use all the time, which is, from a facilitator point of view, steps. And steps you'll see in the video as a kind of a drop down, very easy to manage workflow. We're using push sync, which is syncing the PDF so that all participants are seeing everything at the same time. And finally, I wanted to hear your thoughts about annotation. So what that means is you're making annotations directly on a PDF that is housed in a workspace page. So once again, please feel free to note your comments and reflections in the chat beside the live stream, and I'll share the recording now. We start with the premise that you've created a dedicated page in Howspace that will help guide the conversations, will help bring transparency and include interactive elements, aspects that are crucial to a successful meeting. Integrating a Howspace page into a Teams meeting starts by adding the page as an app, as we see here. From the perspective of the administrator or admin, who might be facilitating the interactions in the meeting, the session can be designed in advance and put into what's called steps. This allows you to build any workflow in advance and run it seamlessly through a ready-made drop-down menu, where each step triggers changes that everyone sees immediately. This frees the facilitator from thinking too much about the technical changes needed, and instead to focus on the participants and the flow and engagement of the meeting. During this part of the meeting, the presenter is sharing a PDF slide deck. The meeting participants are able to click it to open it up in full screen mode, or enlarge it even more into presentation mode. While in the Teams meeting, the admin can use a feature called push sync on the PDF, which will change the slide for everyone viewing the slides. Otherwise, you can allow the participants to individually flip through the slides at their own pace. Another collaboration feature to help elicit people's comments or questions is to encourage the use of the annotation tool. This can be done during the Teams meeting through the shared app, or then on the page after the meeting has ended. To annotate directly onto a PDF on a workspace page, click the highlight icon to turn it green, highlight or draw a square around something of note, and click on the comment field of a chat question on the same page. The highlighted area will automatically paste into the comment field. Add any additional comments and click Publish. Yeah, so I'm looking at the chat. We've had a discussion also in the private questions about the AI and using closed captioning. So we can expand on that as well in the public questions. But I'm just curious to hear what people are taking from that video, or now it's the 2 series of videos now that we've shared of our public of our meeting in Teams. And of course, afterwards, we'll be talking a little bit more so on the side of the less reliance on the live Teams meeting and more so on the asynchronous or on your own time, what happens after the live session. So we'll be getting into that. So I'll just pause here to see if there's any particular questions that I can pull out. And thank you also for our colleagues who are answering some of the questions as we present. One of the comments saying that there's a benefit for internal meetings. Of course, internal meetings is where Howspace and Teams does shine because of the fact that you've got an audience that is used to using Teams, that they're kind of native platform and kind of desktop. So it's certainly the case where it's internal meetings are shining here. Do you recommend inviting and sending via Teams meeting instead and have it integrated during the meeting? Maybe Otto, you could also come on stage as we kind of reflect on some of these questions.
Yeah, I think like this. If I understand the question right, I would say yes, inviting the meeting from Teams calendar or Teams meeting, and then during the meeting you can just add the application. Of course, you can just open up the meeting without all the participants before and add the application kind of to wait there in the menu, and then when the meeting starts you can just share that to make it easier for yourself.
And then the second question was, between meetings, will participants then log in via Teams or Howspace directly?
Yeah, that's actually something that Johanna was kind of already mentioning a bit. You can log in. You are logging in from Teams because in many cases, like for example, Teams meetings are kind of chats in Teams. So you can find this application from the chat tab after the meeting. So all the people who participate in meeting, afterwards they just open up their chat from Teams and they find the same application, same workspace from there. They can continue working quite easily from there. Or as I'm going to show you in some few minutes, you can add the same workspace to your channel in, for example, your organizational Teams channel.
Yeah, and I like that comment that retaining the flow of dialogue, that's such an important thing, so that you don't feel like you're having kind of like one dialogue and then a week later you kind of were trying to remember what exactly was that conversation about, and the context shift and the mind energy that it takes to actually get refocused into the conversation. So that flow of dialogue is so important.
And especially when you have some specific topic to work around, like where you should get done, it's really that.
Yeah, one question in the chat, I think I'll use this as the last one before we go on to the third, which is, what does it take for us to start using Howspace in Teams? So of course, this particular person has a Teams account and a subscription to Howspace, so we can arrange a meeting afterwards, but essentially it would just require, actually, Otto, if you want to speak to this comment about how to get the Teams account going.
Yeah, of course, it depends. It's a bit like case by case, depending on customer size, and the contract, exact contract. But then what is needed is the configuration of the SSO, and then some small configurations with your IT, like Microsoft admin and Howspace admin. So, or the main user. So there are some people who have to have access for certain places to make this configuration happen.
And after the webinar, we'll have a spot where you can ask any specific questions or book a meeting with us so we can go through those case by case. So actually, why don't we go on to the third demo, and then we'll still have time for questions and answers afterwards. So Otto, I'll pass it to you to talk about our final example.
Yes. I just present my screen. To get the idea from what we were talking before about having the like in between meetings or asynchronous collaboration without meeting, but then combining Teams and Howspace. And the previous examples were more synchronous collaboration during meeting, but with this Howspace application, when we add it to channel or chat tab, it is easy and engaging to continue the collaboration. And you reach everyone really easily after meeting or between meetings. And when the app is added here in the same environment where you're working every day, it really lowers the threshold to participate and continue the collaboration also, because it's so like seamless and easy to just check it out afterwards. For example, after this kind of webinar, like here I've added for this general channel this webinar to my tab of this channel, and I find it easily from here, and then I can just scroll down, check all the comments, and also after this meeting I can reply for some questions if there is some questions coming afterwards. And what we will have also here from here is that you can get notifications from when somebody's tagging a person. Like I would get a notification straight to my activity in Teams. So there are a lot of possibilities that to develop, especially when we have more and more experiences from this combination. But yeah, you can easily browse here, use the AI, do all the other things that was shown in the videos. And for example, from this, I could just look the AI inside, for example, Work Cloud, like this. So making quick analysis and so on easy from this channel. And then, as somebody already asked it, I could show it from this chat in the chat with my colleague, and that's also not maybe so useful in private context, like having a one-on-one chat. But if we think about some organizations not using channels so much, this might be useful. Or if we have some temporary co-work, like 5 to 15 people doing something in a chat, you can always add the application to the tab in your chat. And same here, then in a channel, that you can just do all the same stuff than with the channels application in a channel. And then when we think about the adding the application to channel, that makes it really, there are different possibilities here, because you can also kind of expand that idea of team or the group you are having a chat with, because you can share this Howspace application or the Howspace workspace with external users. So I mean people outside your organization who are not using the same Teams environment than you are. So we would use with Erno this workspace from this chat, and then some external consultants or whoever we are working with, they could be part of the collaboration from browser as kind of old-fashioned way or so on. And then we kind of expand this whole Teams environment with this small window from this Teams channel or chat straight to Howspace workspace, where we have some external people who we're working with. And also when you can add the same workspace to many different channels, we could use this for example in organizational-wide transformation processes, strategy development processes, and so on. So whatever organization-wide development there is, where there is a need to get all the employees, for example, to participate, it's really low threshold to do it from your own Teams general channel if the Howspace workspace is added there as an app, compared to the process that you have to share the link to all the people and so on. And what else? I think that's the biggest thing when adding the ad application to channel or chat, that you can kind of make the audience larger, especially with channels, when using all the channels organization is using, or then you can expand the Teams kind of collaboration happening in Teams outside your own organization. And then again, all the co-created content, large-scale discussions, and so on, they can be reviewed, refined, analyzed with our AI features. So that's a quite big thing also. So Johanna, would you take from this and let's have a look at the questions and other stuff?
Thankfully, Erno, our behind-the-scenes Microsoft Teams co-guru with Otto, is answering some of these more technical Teams questions. So, for example, there was a question about Microsoft's Copilot being more of a personal assistant for document creation, and that sort of differs very greatly from our AI at Howspace. So, thanks for that response, Erno. Hopefully, that clarified things. Also, there's a question about, obviously loading Howspace within Teams. And there was a question about doing it the other way around. And thankfully, we just got a response. Actually, this was a private question. And if it would be possible to embed Microsoft Teams meeting into Howspace. If that's the angle here that the question is taking, then we have to say, no, unfortunately, embedding a Teams meeting isn't supported by Microsoft, because from Microsoft's perspective, meetings are primarily used inside the Teams desktop application. So there's a restriction there. And I think if it was not from the Teams meeting perspective, it was just sort of loading, let's say, the Teams app environment into Howspace, then the answer, again, I believe Otto is no. So in this case, the integration is only when we're talking about taking a Howspace process, a page, and putting it into the context of the Microsoft Teams environment. And there was one comment, I forget where I saw it, and it's exactly right. And maybe Otto, you can speak to this, about the fact, let me try to find it here. It was the idea where you're trying to take that Howspace page and possibly even putting it into multiple channels or multiple.
Yes.
Yeah, can you speak to that and how that might even promote cross-functional or cross-departmental collaboration?
Yeah, the idea behind here is that if there is, for example, 5 teams and we have some project or process that we should get done in our organization, so that few people from all of those teams they have to be part of it, but we don't. It's kind of not. It's useless to make a team for them, because then it's just like short period to do something and to get those all people engaged for that. It could be really useful to add Howspace for all of those teams, the one same Howspace workspace to all of those teams channels. So make this kind of cross team shared workspace, connecting all these teams and all the people having access straight from their own home team to this workspace. And it could also work in a more large scale and in a function level or department level or whole organization wide level. And then again, as I said before, you could have this kind of external collaboration, like cross-organizational collaboration. But of course, some organization has to kind of own the workspace, but still you are able to join from outside the whole the owner organization to Howspace, but it's not so easy to do it in Teams. Now in this new Teams update, they made it a bit more easier to change these accounts between your own and the guest accounts, but still you need to have the guest account. But for Howspace, you don't need to have any account or any. I think there's quite a less of this kind of ID management that you need to get done. So especially for quick need for this kind of cross-org stuff, I would say it works well. And then again, you can have it also in the meetings, and even the other one is external. So that also kind of supporting the idea of keeping the context all the time, like even that you are from different organizations. It could be also like from 5 different organizations, but or then we've had this idea that if like doing some kind of consultancy work, there could be Howspace workspace in like many different. You have like 10 teams, teams groups, and then you have in all of those a different Howspace with different external people. So kind of creating a management system there for all the stuff you need with all those external people you're working with. There are a lot of possibilities to kind of expand the idea of teams with this Howspace workspace inside there.
Yeah, I see that, the trans-organizational collaboration is a nice little term to kind of expand the thinking as well. And the enterprising organizations could have the one conversation in theory using Howspace to circumnavigate Teams limitations. Yeah, I think when it comes to also Teams limitations, I've just even heard very basic things like the fact that it cannot be personalized and customized. And so, that context building that is so important to actually shared meaning and developing a shared purpose and meaning really that's the kind of the beauty of Howspace, and that personalization it's a small thing, but it really goes a long way.
Yeah, especially when you need to engage people for something. The small things make really happen.
Yeah,
and in general, Teams is not really compared to Howspace. There are not many things that you can really modify. So
yeah.
that's
And Erno mentioned just a follow-up question, follow-up response here in the private section. So I'm just going to verbalize that and say that one Howspace workspace can be used even from multiple organizations, teams, environments through multi-tenant functionality used for SSO login. So if that makes sense to you, multi-tenant functionality as well is certainly key there. So I believe we're coming up to time. I think we'll probably pause it for now. We will get back to the questions that we haven't responded to, of course. I'm going to, just below this, this live feed, just open up a polls question and next steps, just to get some quick understanding from you guys of what you'd like to do for next steps. My suggestion, of course, is to have a very quick pulse survey about how you experience this webinar. If you can just rate this webinar in terms of a couple of factors. And also, I'm curious to know, how has this webinar inspired you to collaborate or facilitate differently? Whether it's just Howspace, whether it's using Teams, or then, of course, a combination of both now that it's possible. And as next steps, as I mentioned, there's a very quick, very easy booking widget. And that is for if you'd like to talk to somebody at Howspace, whether that's about getting an account at Howspace, whether it's integrating the two, Microsoft and Teams, together, or if you just want to get inspired about how to run engaging meetings and collaborate differently, we are here to have those conversations with you and inspire you. So any final thoughts, Erno, before we sign off? Of course, we'll answer the questions later.
Sorry. I think this was really, really good, especially with this small situation, because it's always when you're opening something and doing some new things, you learn new things. And
Yeah.
I think this is a really huge opportunity and a new thing to do for many organizations, especially when talking about modern ways of working. This is a new thing, a modern way to do it.
Yeah.
So let's go.
Yeah. So thanks so much for attending our webinar today. Hope you found it interesting and useful. Please, let's continue the conversation. If you have any other further questions, the recording will be on the page later on today or tomorrow. So really appreciate all of the engagement today, and have yourselves a fantastic rest of your Wednesday. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Thanks.